But first, let's check in with Will Richmond, the digital city editor for the Herald News, and our weekly roundtable discussion of our own concerning the issues of the week. Hey, Will, how are you?
I'm good, Keith. How's it going?
Good. A lot happening this week. Let's start, first of all, with a little bit of breaking news from this morning. There was a shooting incident on Highland Avenue in Fall River. One person was injured and taken to the hospital. At the time, non-life-threatening injuries taken to Charlton and then up to Rhode Island Hospital. Any new details that you can add?
Well, at this point, as we're taping this on Thursday afternoon, nothing has been announced yet in terms of an arrest or any suspects that are being, public assistance is being helped to locate. According to the reporter we've had out at the scene, police did surround a home on Mount Pleasant Street, which is a short distance away from the Highland Avenue home. This occurred around 12:30, 1 o'clock today. At that point, they had units in Kevlar vests, canine dogs were out there, but as they cleared the scene, no one was visibly arrested from that location or anything. So it seems there is an active search going on, and so at this point, there's more to come, I'm sure, but it seems police continue to investigate.
Now, it appears that it was a burglary. Has there been any indication on whether the occupants of the home knew this burglar, or could it have just been a random burglary attempt?
Early information that we've received indicates that it may have something to do with the January drug raid that took place in that home.
That same home?
Yeah, that same home
Right
on Highland Avenue, in which police recovered over 500 bags of heroin and about $1,500. It may have been someone looking to target that person that was arrested in January. However, our early information is that that person was no longer living at that address, so there may have been a situation of mistaken identity there.
Yeah. All right. So follow the Herald News for updates on this story as it progresses. All right, let's move to politics and political items of note here in the city of Fall River. Mayor Correa yesterday, in an article in the Herald News, talked about, again, trying to push for potential privatization of the city's trash service, saying he still wants to meet with the union sanitation workers and giving them pretty much an ultimatum that they were scheduled to meet, I believe, Friday, which is tomorrow when we're recording this, to talk about some bargaining issues around the future of sanitation service in Fall River. Anything new to add?
Yeah, actually, we have learned today that a session has been scheduled, a negotiation session has been scheduled for tomorrow. Both sides are potentially sitting down. Certainly with the case of the last session, it seemed one was scheduled and then did not happen. So this may be a case of once it's actually happening, we'll believe it at that point. But at this point, that seems to be moving forward. And then also on the trash front, the mayor's office put out notice today that a press conference will be held Tuesday morning to announce a new pay-as-you-throw enforcement program that is also going to include fines as part of this. No further details were released at this point beyond the announcement of the press conference and the purpose for why.
Now, in terms of a pay-as-you-throw fine, would that need city council approval?
That's something we're going to have to find out. The notice for the press conference just said a new enforcement program to include fines.
Okay.
No finer details have been released yet, and I think they're probably waiting for Tuesday to release that information. So what that will mean in terms of city council involvement, we'll have to find out.
In the city council chambers for quite some time, they've talked a lot about trash and they've talked a lot about windows, and both of them came up this week. The window situation came up again in terms of some of the damaged windows at the Government Center. But the Herald News had a story speaking with City Council President Sean Kadim about his thoughts that former Mayor Flanagan was involved with the installation of those 22 windows a couple of years ago that was not put out to bid. And he was sounds like he was pretty forthcoming about his knowledge of the situation. And there's been buzz throughout the city that a lot of people knew of this, that it was actually the mayor that was part of the plan to get these windows installed. So I guess it's interesting to have it come out by Sean Kadim and this aspect that at that time he was also city administrator.
Right. If Sean was certainly right in the mix as this was happening. It's interesting he waited until this point to sort of point the finger at former Mayor Will Flanagan and Corporation Counsel Liz Souza. It's keep in mind he did run for mayor in the recall election and obviously for city council last year, and was very successful in his city council run. So curious timing. This is information people have been looking for a long time, and he's kind of withheld that to this point. So, not sure what the motives are there. We've not gotten a response from Mayor Flanagan to see what he thinks about Sean Kadim's revelation here, and something tells me he might have a different story to tell, but his silence at this point, doesn't help him at this point.
Is there any type of investigatory ramifications potentially on this? I know it was set for investigation, but we really haven't heard much about an investigation and what it might turn up.
Well, I mean, unless it was to turn up information about maybe Sean himself or something, I'm not sure what the penalties could be. Certainly right. Flanagan is out of office. Souza is no longer employed by the city. So the penalties on them, they could face penalties from the state, but in terms of how that would affect the city, it seemed to be pretty minor at this point since the main players are no longer in office. All
right. Let's switch now to some education news. The City of Fall River Public Schools Department received some encouraging news this week in that their school performance has been on the uptick, and they are moving up on the list in terms of the quality of education being provided here in Fall River. They're still, below levels where they want to be, but some good news nonetheless for city education officials.
Yeah, they certainly still have a long ways to go to rank amongst the top districts in the state, but they did make significant progress. They've moved 20 spots up the list. They're no longer in that bottom 10%, which also has ramifications potentially related to the expansion of charter school seats in Fall River. Mm-hmm. At this point, charter school legislation has targeted those districts that were in the bottom 10% for expansion. So we'll see what happens there. This could put a stop on further charter school seats here, though the charter school debate is a very active one on Beacon Hill right now. So who knows where that legislation could end up in terms of what the threshold is for being allowed for expansion or increased seats going forward.
Right. But good news nonetheless for the city of Fall River in terms of public school education here. So we'll be following that as well. One final piece before we go on what's happening in the coming few days at the paper is, yes, on April 4th we had a snowstorm. And kind of hit really hard in Fall River around the middle of the day, toward the end of the workday, and it caused quite a havoc with local city roads. Did the Herald News do any investigation in terms of what looked like a late response in city officials getting out there and city workers and treating the roads?
Well, really, I think this was a matter of timing and expectations. The weather reports coming in from sources including the National Weather Service were indicating about 1 to 3 inches. Many times our experience with spring snow is you get snow, it melts pretty quickly, it changes to rain, disappears pretty quickly. But this one sort of defied those expectations, kept snowing, and by the end of the day, one of the last advisories I saw from the Weather Service was an expectation of about 6 to 10 inches in the Fall River area.
Right.
So that's quite the difference from what was initially expected, and that afternoon timing of it just continuing to come down, especially around that school dismissal and right. Early evening commute times really hit hard.
Yeah, I know here at BCC, the college officially closed at 5 o'clock for the day, but just before then, the city had closed down portions of Roberson and Highland Avenue. So a lot of people who were looking to get down, say, President Avenue to get to Route 24 were actually coming down toward this part of the city and merging onto Ellsbury Street. It took me 1 hour, Will, to leave the parking lot here at BCC to get to the end of Ellsbury Street before getting on Route 24. So that was part of the issue with traffic when some of the streets were closed because of the snow. So a very interesting day nonetheless. And hopefully we're good until at least December before we see any more snow. All right, Will, what's going on at the paper this weekend?
Well, on Sunday, we're kicking off a week-long series looking at the Braga Bridge. The Friday, April 15th, is actually the 50th anniversary of when the bridge was opened. So we're spending a couple days here looking at different aspects of the bridge from back then 50 years ago to today, and the effects that the bridge and 195 through the city have had on Fall River.
I'm sure some people will also think that it's been 50 years that the bridge has still been under construction and under repair. It's been a long time under these last parts of the repair process at the bridge. All right, Will, have a great week. We'll talk to you next Thursday.
All right, you too, Keith.